Hey, Shalom, Rabbi. I actually had a question about Kohelet. Last week, you kind of touched on it when someone had mentioned, I guess, purpose. And the question that I have is, and I'm just asking because I don't know. I'm wondering, do the rabbis ever look to Kohelet as a source to kind of, provide guidance for living apart from the Torah? Because essentially, King Solomon points to the Torah and he kind of breaks it down really simply. So I'm wondering if that's something that rabbis kind of look to.
Kohelet is mentioned in the Talmud, but there is debate on whether it should have been included in the canon. One, there's very problematic statements in Kohelet. The initial statement of everything being meaningless. The understanding is that Kohelet was written by Shlomo Melech when he was very young. There's just some things that don't coincide with other statements that appear in Mishlei, in the book of Proverbs. So, of course, there's statements reiterated in the Talmud and by the rabbis in Kohelet, but that doesn't really mean it. I mean, there's statements mentioned in books that we call apocryphal nowadays, like Ben Sira. I think the message there is that you can learn from any book, only because the rabbis in the Talmud happen to mention a book that appears outside the Torah. What doesn't mean that's the only book you're allowed to learn from. You're allowed to learn from any book that amplifies the Torah. That's the understanding. Now, it's true, by them canonizing certain books, it means that they're sanctioning these books as good and edifying to be able to study. And I really think that's what the Catholic Church tried to do with the writings of Paul initially. I think that the early church believers viewed Paul just like they would have viewed other rabbis, giving their interpretation of what an agadic tale meant to them at that time. Just like the rabbis, only because they happened to quote Mishlei or Kohelet, that they would in any way resemble what people do nowadays, that they, I guess from a Christian perspective, they'll try to cast out demons with statements in Proverbs or in Psalms. They'll elevate a pasuk in Isaiah to a pasuk in Bereshit. I don't think it matters what book you study as long as it's amplifying a Torah message. The Jewish people weren't waiting for the rabbis to sanction books for them to study. There was tons of books. As a matter of fact, the Talmud says that there were thousands of prophets. As long as that prophet, like it says in Isaiah chapter 8, is speaking what's in the testimony, what's in the Torah, then there's light in their words. But the notion of divinely inspired text is not, in my opinion, a Jewish principle. Yes, these texts are holy, but holy in the sense of being set apart. They're sanctioned and set apart from other books, but that doesn't mean that they in any way come close to the message that everyone would agree is unchangeable. But that distinction is never made nowadays, and this is why we have so many different groups and sects and cults, which really doesn't bother me as long as they don't exclude each other and condemn each other to hell every week, which is pretty much what happens. But I just saw, like John said, that James, our misguided brother James, made another video against Rav Dror for nothing. For nothing. I mean, it's completely baseless. Just because he happens to disagree in an ideological issue with his teacher, he goes and he says that this is anti-Torah. Right? I mean, if that's not carrying God's name in vain, I don't know what that is. It's completely inappropriate. He is, for all intents and purposes, a fool. But this is what people do on a grand scale when they condemn other people's religion, that when one movement condemns another movement. Now, there's enough reasons in the Torah to condemn other people. We don't have to make up more. Clearly, Torah is against individuals who break Torah, who teach against literal statements in the Torah. But just to condemn people because you happen not to believe in a statement in Kohelet, right, whether it's true or not, I mean, there's some things there that are a bit problematic.
Yeah.
But the last statement is hardcore. The complete sum up of man is to fear God and keep his commandments. That makes sense. But it seems just like the ramblings of someone who's deemed wise by his peers. And there's a lot of wisdom in there. It's clearly a lot wiser than whatever is taught nowadays in universities, in my opinion. But I would make a distinction, and I think the rabbis also made a distinction between what appears there and what appears in the 5 books of Moses.
And that's what I mean. I mean, there were things in there that seemed pretty wise, like, basically the sum of man is to basically keep Torah, right? And then he also says some other things, whereas, not to be too strict and not to be overzealous and not to be too lenient when it comes to Torah observance. Like, that's something that, that I can take with me, because it makes sense. So there are things in there that I feel that are positive, and then I'm wondering if that's something that's also viewed by the rabbis, and that's something that maybe they reference from here and there, just to kind of more or less spread some positivity.
Mhm. I don't think there's anything ethically new in Kohelet that doesn't already appear in Torah in some sense. I always make the statement with the New Testament that there's nothing ethically new there. It seems like JC is just reiterating Torah principles. It seems that ethics really can't be improved on, that everything we consider ethical has its roots somehow in the 5 books of Moses. So if what it's doing is just amplifying ethical principles in the Torah, then it's good. Then it's a good thing. Even when the Quran does it, it's a good thing. The problem is when people start elevating that to the level of Torah, and then it just starts to over-encompass everything. I'll tell you, the vast majority of Christians, I have a video on YouTube called Defeat Any Christian Argument. I made this video, I guess, maybe 10 years ago. And it was just get them to try to justify everything they believe in the 5 books of Moses. And then once we get past that, which we never will, then we can move into the prophets. You would win every debate. You would win every... It's just because there isn't enough there. Now, I wish the Torah had more to tell us, honestly, just because there's some things that they're a bit ambiguous, and this is why there's people who are correctly misguided. Correctly misguided is that sometimes things could be understood in a different manner, and it's not their fault that someone literally believes that God has an arm or God has a leg. Why? Because the Torah didn't really take the time to say, like, you know what, this is just figurative. It's just symbolic. Now, the Rambam did take the time, right? But a lot of these people don't want to understand the Rambam as what he really is. That regarding the Guide for the Perplexed, More Nevuchim, a guide to understanding the complexity of God.
We got quite a lot of comments coming in, and we got someone in the room that has the hand raised.